Okay, well, thank you everybody for joining me this morning. It's a really beautiful day outside and it's a Saturday morning, so I'm thrilled that you're here with me. And thank you for those of you who are watching the recording as well, who didn't turn up on Saturday morning because of prior commitments or wanting to be out in the sun. I appreciate your company as well at a later date. So welcome to this webinar on diet, nutrition and the immune system. And I just actually wanted to first signpost to say that I have created this webinar really for the general public. I know that there are a few nutrition professionals who have registered. And if you'd like to watch the practitioner version, which has different language, less explanations, more information about things like glutathione, a few more referenced studies, that's on the Pure Encapsulations website, which is here if you want to access that. But for everybody else, and also you are very welcome here at this webinar. I will proceed, I guess. So I've started the webinar with a quote by a politician, but I've chosen this quote specifically because we in the Western world, in fact, do not actually have healthy citizens. You know, we're in the middle of, or slightly on the other side of, a pandemic where the health of our community as a whole has come into really sharp focus. But it's also become really obvious that those that are worst affected are those who have existing health issues, and some of those at the highest risk are ones suffering from common lifestyle affected issues such as diabetes or cardiovascular disease, or who have general existing inflammation in the body. So that is to say that those that are the worst affected from this viral pandemic are the ones for whom whole diet, nutrition and lifestyle plays a significant, if not a defining role. So nutrition significantly affects the immune system. Nutritional status is directly correlated with immune health. Both overnutrition and undernutrition have negative consequences for immune cell function. And I interpret that to say that the middle ground is optimal nutrition. That for the immune system to work best, the body actually needs to be well nourished. But this actually doesn't mean bulking up on superfoods or individual nutrients for a week or two because you have symptoms. It's generally appreciated that the long-term and consistent dietary patterns it is the long-term and consistent dietary patterns that either benefit human health or conversely create inflammation and create stress in the body. If an unhealthy diet is followed as a general rule. So one Big Mac does have instant impact, but if the rest of your month is healthy, or even the rest of your day is healthy, the impact that that single Big Mac has is transient. But also vice versa, you need to be consistently good with your habits for the immune system to work properly. So this is not about being perfect. It's about looking at the big picture and seeing what that looks like over the course of a week or a month. It's not about never eating anything that's not nutritionally perfect. It's actually just about what is the global picture of what you're eating look like. So I wanted to start with a couple of definitions because the rest of the presentation will make more sense. I've dotted these definitions in through the presentation just before I'm about to talk about something, but I wanted to start with what is inflammation. Now I've taken this image without permission from Google, but it was shared fairly widely on social media, so I hope that she doesn't mind. This is a picture of a sunburn. And I chose sunburn because, of course, the inflammation is obvious. So inflammation is a local physical condition in which part of the body becomes red or swollen or hot and is often painful. Inflammation is caused by the immune system. It is a reaction of the immune system. And it is often present in the body as a reaction to injury or infection. During the process of inflammation, the body's white blood cells are created at higher number, and they produce a number of signaling chemicals that act like bullets essentially in the body. So white blood cells are the army, bullets are the inflammation itself, and this is needed to protect us from infection. So we create inflammation as a direct defense against infection, such as bacteria or viruses. We also create inflammation in order to heal damaged tissue. So inflammation is good, actually, but with most things in the body, there is a healthy range that is needed. So too little inflammation and the immune system can't defend us from infection, and it can't repair damaged tissue. But too much inflammation is like a bonfire that turns into a bushfire, and the inflammation itself it becomes the main problem. It damages tissues and it causes symptoms such as pain or fatigue. So some of the causes of inflammation include bacteria, viruses, injuries such as a paper cut or a splinter. We can create inflammation from the effects of chemicals or radiation. So you can have a radiation burn, such as a sunburn. Your body can naturally create inflammation as part of the disease process. So diseases or medical conditions that cause inflammation or that are associated with inflammation often have itis on the end. So cystitis, inflammation of the bladder, often caused by an infection. Bronchitis is an inflammation of the bronchi, again, often caused by some kind of environmental irritant, such as continued exposure to something that you have an allergy to, like a dust or a pollen or an infection, etc., etc. So signs of inflammation include redness, heat, swelling, pain, and loss of function. But if you have inflammation in your liver or you have inflammation in your gut, you may not necessarily see the redness for obvious reasons. You can't see your internal organs. And sometimes when you have inflammation in your body, you'll see the inflammation in the organs that you can see. So you might find that you have inflammation in your eyes or in your skin. And by that I mean redness or discomfort. So examples of loss of function include not being able to move a joint properly, or having a worsened sense of smell, for example, during a cold, or having difficulty breathing if you have bronchitis. You can also have silent inflammation. So you can have a very significant degree of inflammation in the body without actually being aware of there being anything really different. So then the second thing that I wanted to explain is something called oxidative stress. So oxidative stress, usually when I'm talking about is another type of inflammation. So the inflammation itself, I liken to fire. It causes heat, and it's like a burn, or it's associated with burn. Oxidative stress is more like rust. And in fact, rust is an example of oxidative stress to metal. So oxidative stress is an imbalance between free radicals and antioxidants. So free radicals are oxygen-containing molecules that have an uneven number of electrons. They're imbalanced. And because they're imbalanced, they are reactive. They kind of roam around inside the body and they attack or damage other molecules in the vicinity. So these can actually really cause large chain chemical reactions because they're very, very reactive. They react really easily with other molecules in their area. So those reactions are called oxidation. So one free radical can cause oxidation of the tissue in the surrounding area. And sometimes that's necessary. So again, the body doesn't do anything for no reason. We create oxidants because they're protective against infection, for example. But as with inflammation, we have a degree to which this is helpful. So not enough oxidation will cause problems. It doesn't allow organs to function properly, and it doesn't allow us to defend against infection. But too much also creates this issue of significant oxidative stress. It's a second type of inflammation. So it causes rust, and it causes rust of the DNA. It causes rust of the fats that make up our brains and our skin cells, and it's a significant problem for the immune system. So then antioxidants are molecules that kind of mop up the rust. So they mop up the oxidative stress. They help to balance it out. So everything in the body is about balance. So when you have an oxidant, you have an antioxidant, and they both need to be in balance for the body to work properly. If you have too many antioxidants and not enough oxidative stress, that also means that the body can't do what it's designed to do. So then we come to diet. So the Western diet is characterized by high amounts of calorie-dense foods, including processed and damaged saturated fats and oils, refined carbohydrates and sugar, and low levels of nutrient-rich foods, including fruit and vegetables that contain fiber, essential fatty acids, and this pattern of eating can lead to significant changes in the immune system, including activation of chronic inflammation and reduced defense against infection. The Western diet is considered to be an obesogenic diet, meaning it is strongly associated with obesity and is considered to be a direct cause of obesity. So obesity is associated with susceptibility to a number of infections, including the flu. And remember that COVID-19 is technically a flu. In the swine flu, obesity was found to be associated with the development of infection and significantly longer stays in intensive care and mortality outcomes, meaning survival. So obesity has actually been found to be an independent risk factor for increased disease and death from all strains of the flu. So here we have, it's kind of 1 + 1 = 2. The Western diet creates obesity, and obesity creates a significant susceptibility to increased disease status in flu viruses, but also poorer outcomes, longer stays in hospital, and less survival outcomes, decreased survival outcomes. So the Western diet directly contributes to inflammation in lots of ways. So the Western diet contributes to both undernutrition and overnutrition. So undernutrition is when you're not eating enough food that contains substances necessary for health and growth. So it's not that you're not eating enough food, it's that the food that you're eating isn't nutrient dense. It doesn't contain the basic nutrients that your body needs to be healthy. Overnutrition is actually a form of malnutrition, but again, it doesn't mean that you're not eating food. It means that the food that you are eating contains calories, but is not nutrient dense. You are eating in a way that leads to the accumulation of body fat. And so here is where we are pro-obesogenic. So the Western diet is actually both undernutritious and overnutritious simultaneously. You're not getting enough nutrients and healthy component parts of the food in order for your body to do what it needs to do. You are getting over excessive intake of calories without nutrition. So you don't necessarily have to be eating huge quantities. You might be eating normal amounts of food, but the contents of the food is so imbalanced that you're simultaneously underfed and overfed from a normal quantity of food. So undernutrition is associated with immunosuppression, which leads to increased susceptibility to infection. You don't have the nutrients that are required for your immune system to do the job that they need to do to protect you against infection. And overnutrition, because of the link to obesity and because of the component parts of the food, because the components of the food eaten are in themselves pro-inflammatory. Overnutrition is associated with low-grade chronic inflammation that increases the risk of metabolic and cardiovascular disease, promotes autoimmune disease, and disrupts protective immunity. I wanted to say something, I forgot what it was. With overnutrition and this low-grade chronic inflammation, it means that you have a baseline level of inflammation that is unhealthy. And that means it's a little bit like when you are boiling a massive pot of water in order to make pasta for a family of people. So in that scenario, usually we're using a soup, a large saucepan, a soup pot, maybe 20 litres of water. Actually, I don't even know if that's right. Maybe it can't possibly be 20 litres, 5 litres, let's say. should have thought this through. You use your biggest pot on the stove, you fill it up with water. Because the water is cold, you have to actually have the heat on underneath the water for a significant amount of time for the water to come up to the boil. And that's normal and healthy in the body. You need to actually have a significant amount of stimuli in order to get inflammation up to the point where it's tangible. But if you've had that pot of water sitting on a very low, flame for, half the day, you decided early on you were going to prepare your, cooking dinner for your entire family, and you're going to make pasta as part of that dinner. So you've been in the kitchen, you started the water early, and it's just been sitting there, not even on a simmer. It's just got a little bit of steam coming off the top. But when you decide you're ready to boil the water, you only need to turn the heat up a little bit, and it doesn't take very long for that water to come to the boil. And that's what happens when you have chronic low-grade inflammation. The inflammation is there just below the surface so constantly that it doesn't take very much stress or stimuli to have a significant inflammatory reaction. And I think that's probably what we're seeing with COVID-19 and why it's why that particular group of people are considered to be such high risk, because they're inflamed. The extra stimulation from the inflammation, from the immune system responding to the virus, as well as to the damage that the virus is doing, because the water is already hot, that extra level of stimulation creates a rapid boil, and the body doesn't have the resources to deal with that. So undernutrition and overnutrition associated with the Western diet are significantly problematic when it comes to infection. So in animal studies, they have found that the Western diet increases inflammation specifically in the lungs, that it reduces the number of cells that help us to identify and fight infection, and reduces the body's ability to clear viruses from the body. So the consumption of a Western diet severely impairs host defense against viruses. Okay, so my next explanation is about blood sugar. So when we eat food, it is broken down in our digestive tract and it's absorbed across the gut wall and into the bloodstream. So when meals or snacks are balanced and they contain good levels of protein, good levels of fiber, healthy fats, then the absorption happens in a measured way. And our blood sugar doesn't ever really get really high or really low. It is normal to have blood sugar fluctuations, but we have an upper level and a lower level through which the fluctuations, within which the fluctuations are maintained, and that's healthy and normal. When we eat simple carbohydrates, when we drink alcohol, when our meals are not actually balanced, when we drink sweet drinks, or we eat foods that contain a lot of sugar, or they contain inadequate fiber, inadequate protein, inadequate healthy fats, then actually it causes blood sugar levels to swing above and below the points that our body is comfortable with. So sugar in the blood can damage blood vessels, and it can damage nerves. And the body reacts very swiftly to elevations of blood sugar to correct too much in the bloodstream. And to do that, it creates a hormone called insulin. So insulin causes blood sugar to swing low. It transports glucose out of the blood, but it's generally disproportionate. When blood sugar is high like that, the body has a slightly panicky reaction, and the amount of insulin that's produced is disproportionate to the amount of glucose in the blood. So this then causes blood glucose levels to swing low. And when they swing low, we actually create stress hormones. So it's stressful for the body to do that. It increases feelings of stress in the person. And that triggers behaviors around eating. So we'll then want to eat more carbohydrates or something with glucose that will get the blood sugar back up again. So other causes of low blood sugar outside of those swings caused by insulin include going too long between meals, or not eating properly for the amount of exercise that's being done. And this whole picture is actually pro-inflammatory. So stress hormones, producing stress hormones, having high blood sugar and having high insulin, all of those are a pro-inflammatory picture. So glucose, I found this very interesting. Glucose is the most extensively studied nutrient. And I wonder if this is because diabetes is so prevalent. But I never thought about glucose as a nutrient. I actually consider it to be an anti-nutrient, which is what we were taught in college. But it's the most extensively studied nutrient. And high blood sugar, which is called hyperglycemia, high blood sugar after a meal is significantly inflammatory and is considered detrimental. So glucose has the ability to change the immune system, but this normalizes fairly quickly in people who are metabolically healthy. So again, if your overall metabolic health is good and your overall diet patterns are good, then you can have a piece of chocolate cake, or you can have a meal that just consists of a piece of toast. And while in that moment that's not going to be the best for you, you have the mechanisms and the resilience to deal with that, and it's not really going to cause you any problems outside of that moment. They're not going to be, it normalizes quickly. But when there is any degree of metabolic dysfunction, then high blood sugar after a meal increases the magnitude and the duration of the systemic inflammatory responses. And then as that metabolic dysfunction continues, because it's a trajectory, once it's initiated, if it hasn't, once metabolic health starts to deteriorate, then unless you make an intervention, which means changing your diet and changing your lifestyle, it's kind of a one-way street. So as the metabolic dysfunction continues down its pathway, the inflammatory responses get significantly greater and greater. Now there is a spectrum between optimal health and a diagnosable disease such as diabetes. So it's possible to be in that metabolic dysfunction without actually having the diagnosis of diabetes. And it's, there's been a lot of fear mongering in the media around people with no underlying conditions who have had severe reactions to infection, specific to COVID-19 at the moment, but also in the past there's been a lot of this around just the general flu. But just because you don't have diagnosed illness doesn't mean that you are metabolically healthy. So you can be on that spectrum pre-diagnosis. And hyperglycemia, even in the absence of obesity or diabetes, can damage the gut wall, and it can make the gut wall leaky. And I'm going to talk about the gut and its role in immune health as well today. So let's see. So we have adequate information dating back several decades on the effect of glucose consumption on the immune system. And we know glucose affects the immune system immediately after consumption for a few hours. So stress eating a bag of Haribo because you've been stuck inside with your bored kids for 3 months is going to suppress your defense against infection for a few hours, but not for days or weeks. But that's really different than if you're having a bar of chocolate every night on the couch, even if it's a small one, or you're consuming a typical Western diet with cereal and a low-fat yogurt for breakfast, plus tea with sugar, followed by a cereal bar for your morning snack, a sandwich and a fruit juice or a soft drink for lunch, half a pack of digestives with more tea in the afternoon, and so on, then you're likely to be inducing both high blood sugar and high insulin regularly. And that's a completely different, so even in the absence of diagnosed illness, that's a completely different impact on the immune system and a completely different long-term picture. So then insulin is that hormone that helps the body balance and regulate glucose once we've eaten it. So regularly elevated insulin increases inflammation directly in our fat cells. So some specific pro-inflammatory immune cells become elevated and anti-inflammatory immune cells become suppressed. So having elevated insulin on a regular basis, it doesn't need to be all the time, but regular fluctuations and swings in elevations of insulin really have this significant effect of changing the way that the immune system functions at baseline. And it stops the immune system from having a healthy baseline. And that then affects our defense against infection and our ability to recover once we have an infection. So immunonutrition, so the term immunonutrition actually refers to the ability of dietary interventions to change the way that the immune system works. Immunonutrition is used in hospital settings because it improves the outcome of critically ill and surgical patients, and it improves their outcomes because it improves immune function and it decreases susceptibility to complications from infection. So immunonutrition, when it's applied in a hospital setting, reduces the number of infections, the duration of the infection, and also shortens the length of stay in hospital. So that's immunonutrition is really what we're talking about today. It's how does nutrition affect the immune system, and how can we use nutrition to change the status of our immune health and improve our own outcomes. So coming back to the gut, so we can't talk about the immune system without talking about how the gut is involved. So the greatest density of immune cells in your entire body are actually located in your small intestine. And inflammation in the small intestine, which can be directly related to the food that you're eating, or changes in the bacterial community that live in the intestine, can affect your systemic immune system. So this might be presenting as increased reactivity to food, or bad bacterial growth, toxins that are released from the gut because of changes and inflammation in that small intestine can be released into the body and creating oxidative stress and inflammation. And what happens in the gut doesn't stay in the gut. So when you have inflammation and immune system dysfunction in the gut, in the immune system of the gut, that affects the immune system of the whole body. So the gut becomes the central point. Your gut is an environmental translator. So if you think about the human body, we are actually a donut. So we are a solid object, but with a core running through the center. So if you have a look, where you come in the mouth, down the esophagus, through the entire digestive tract, and then out the bottom, that is technically all outside the body. Everything has to cross the gut wall in order to enter into the body. So that gut wall then becomes a major interface between the environment and the body. And the two major sources of external influence in that area of the environment is the food that we eat and the bacteria that we live in the gut. So the gut is an environmental translator. It takes messages from the food that we eat, and it takes messages from the bacteria and the other infectious agents such as viruses that are coming in, and it interprets those in order to help the body understand what's going on and how to respond appropriately to the environment. So if it's not interpreting the environment with messages of tolerance, then the result of that is actually inflammation, because inflammation is how your body responds when it's being told that there's something there that doesn't require tolerance. So tolerance is not responding to something such as an apple or a bacteria. And the opposite of tolerance is reaction. And reaction for the immune system means inflammation. So when we have dysfunction in that process in the gut and in the gut immune system, then we have changes in the bacteria in the gut. So it becomes less healthy, more pro-inflammatory. And we start again having reactions to foods, inflammation that's coming on the gut wall, and inflammation that's being sent up into the body. So because of the exposure of the gut wall to the bacteria and the food that we eat, the immune system in the gut sees far greater action in a single day than the internal immune system sees in your entire life. So when they talk about 70% of the immune system is found in the gut, that's not technically true, but what that really means is that 70% of the active immune cells are found on the gut wall. And that's because that gut immune system is in constant motion. It's constantly reacting, constantly responding, constantly communicating. And a lot of those reactions are tolerance reactions that don't require an inflammatory response. But the gut immune system is pivotal, and it's at the heart of the central immune system. So for everything that requires appropriate inflammation or appropriate non-reaction, the gut is at the center of that communication chain. So making sure that the gut immune system is healthy is a very, very important part of making sure that the lung immune system is healthy, that the nasorespiratory immune system is healthy, that the skin immune system is healthy, that our entire immune system is actually healthy, requires having a healthy gut and a healthy gut immune system specifically. So to have a healthy gut immune system, we need to be eating food that supports the healthy gut immune system. So dietary fibre is actually significantly underconsumed by the Western population in general. And we see that populations that consume the highest levels of fibre have the lowest instances of immune-mediated inflammatory conditions. And this includes infection, and it includes respiratory tract problems. But by fibre, I don't mean all bran. You know, I'm talking about consuming a broad, diverse, and varied range of plant foods. I'm not talking about increasing your added fibre cereal from 1 bowl to 2 bowls and throwing in some Metamucil. So dietary fibre is the most evidenced intervention for gut immune health. So eating plant fibre actually creates something in the gut called short-chain fatty acids. And short-chain fatty acids do many, many things that are really critically important for the body to be healthy in general, but for the immune system to be healthy. So short-chain fatty acids from fibre, from dietary fibre, help to support the gut wall and the environment in the gut. So it helps the environment in the gut to recognize and defend against infection when that is appropriate. So you want to be reacting to an infectious agent that could potentially be damaging or making you sick. You don't want to be reacting to your food. And the gut bacteria and the fibre are a critically important part of how that's regulated in the body and in the gut. So short-chain fatty acids also help to regulate how our genes are switched on and off, and they activate the part of the cell that helps food talk to our immune system. So my next, and I think my last explanation is, what is a cell receptor? So, and for the next 2 pieces of information that I'm going to give you, which are important, I need to do this quick review of what a cell receptor is. So a receptor is a protein that is embedded into the surface of our cells. And external proteins can then dock onto the receptor in order to get into the cell or to initiate a response inside the cell. But in order for this process to work properly, it has to be very, very specific. So each receptor only has a very limited number of proteins that can dock into it. And they have to match like a lock and a key for the message inside the cell to transmit. So this works for things that are beneficial. This is the mechanism through which our cells communicate to each other. This is how hormones work, for example. So a hormone would be this protein. The hormone has to dock onto the receptor in order to tell the cell what to do. But this is also how viruses work. So a virus would be the protein that would dock onto the receptor in order to get into the cell, in order to take over and infect that cell. So cell receptors become incredibly important because they're how anybody gets in and out of the cell usually. Anybody or anybody. Anything gets in and out of the cell. But food is also a metabolite that can directly interact with our immune cells because of cell receptors. So we have receptors on the surface of our cells called G protein coupled receptors. And we also have a different kind of receptor called the transcription factor receptor, such as the aryl hydrocarbon receptor. And so these two receptors, G protein coupled receptors and the aryl hydrocarbon receptor, they translate information directly from food into information for the interior of the cell. So what is food? Right? Food is love. Food is nourishment. Food is family. It's tradition. Food is an answer for a hunger cue. But for our genes and for the immune system, food is information. So we know that food is required to provide the nutrients that our body needs in order to function properly. But it's actually so much more complex and so much more beautiful than that. So metabolites from food can directly interact with our cells. So they become information and they help direct the function of that cell. They literally change the message and change the communication that that cell receives, and therefore changes the interaction of the cells and changes the behavior of the cells. So this is a study from 2014, and by the way, I was really excited to find this image because often when I'm looking at the medical literature, the images of food is a bit of wheat and a carton of milk or something like that, whereas this one actually has real food. It's got broccoli and avocado and whole grains and apples and pears, and she's eating a broccoli. I love it. But this study actually highlights intersection points in the body for dietary related factors such as fatty acids, your omega-3s, proteins, fiber, and the immune system. So you can see in the image here that there are multiple different points in the body where food directly interacts with, communicates with, and changes the immune system. So metabolites in blood, in the lungs and in the bronchial system, in the gut, in our bone marrow, which is where most of our immune system cells are actually made. For females, in the placental transfer of metabolites to the fetus and also in breast milk. So it's incredibly important for the immune system of the mother. And so the food that she eats is incredibly important for the immune system of the mother, but also for the immune system of the baby that she's developing. It's teaching the baby's immune system how to respond appropriately when it's in utero and then when she's feeding it once it's born. And then at various different points in the gut and also in our lymph nodes. So that means that there are receptors on the cells in all of those areas through which the nutrients from food are directly communicating and changing the messaging. So food is information for the immune system. It's not just that food is anti-inflammatory. It's not just that food contains nutrients. It's that food is actually part of the conversation. So what you eat directly affects the conversation around the immune system and tells the immune system how to behave this way or that way. And what that means is that you have a lot of control over how your immune system behaves and responds. So it might take a little bit of time if you're changing your diet for that message to completely change. But as soon as you change the way that you eat, the messages that your cells are getting about how to behave and what's healthy and what's appropriate changes. So it might take, a little while of maintaining that eating pattern for your body to really change, especially if the way that you were eating or your metabolic health wasn't great for a long period of time. This isn't something that happens overnight, but it is something that you have control over because you have complete control over, most of the time, over what you eat. And it also is important, I guess my message is that it doesn't have to be perfect, that I wanted for that to be really clear, that it's not about only ever eating broccoli and avocado, that you just need to make changes and have those changes be consistent over a period of time. It doesn't have to be perfect every day. And that is a significant area of control about you changing the way that your body works in the face of infection. So then the second receptor that I talked about is called the aryl hydrocarbon receptor. And this actually plays a significant role in the health and the regulation of intestinal immunity. And so the aryl hydrocarbon receptor directly interacts with specific compounds in foods and in food families. So the cruciferous vegetable family is one that directly communicates with the aryl hydrocarbon receptor. And the cruciferous vegetable family includes broccoli, Brussels sprouts, kohlrabi, kale, pak choi, cauliflower, and cabbage. So that family of vegetables, cruciferous vegetables, they contain a plant chemical which is called indole 3-carbinol. So when you digest the plant chemical, then it requires, in fact, if you just had indole 3-carbinol by itself, it wouldn't be activated. It requires the process of going through our digestive tract and being exposed to stomach acid to be the active protein that then interacts with the receptor on the outside of the cell. And this promotes healthy immunity and changes the way the immune system works. So the aryl hydrocarbon receptor is also activated by flavonoids. So flavonoids is another type of chemical found in a plant, and a flavonoid is, actually, in fact, I explained flavonoid, but flavonoids are from the pigment of the plant, and they're found in green, blue, purple, red, and orange fruit and vegetables. So again, a broad range of colourful fruits and vegetables, once they've been digested and absorbed, have the ability to directly communicate with your immune system cells and change immune communication. So omega-3 fatty acids are another very specific food that have a big impact on the immune system. So omega-3 fatty acids are found in flax, but in more concentration in kelps and oily fish. So oily fish includes trout, salmon, sardines, mackerel, and anchovies. And omega-3 fatty acids might actually be one of the major reasons that the Mediterranean diet has so much good research around its health qualities. So omega-3 shows anti-inflammatory effects because of their interaction with cell surface receptors. So omega-3 fatty acids have long been considered to be a protective metabolite for asthma and other airway inflammation. So good for lung health in general. And in part, this originated from observations from Eskimos who have extremely high levels of omega-3 fatty acids in their diet and extremely low levels of heart disease, chronic inflammation, and asthma. So omega-3 fatty acids are one of the foods that we can consume that will help to keep that baseline level of inflammation low and healthy. So it allows us to appropriately respond when we need inflammation, but it helps to switch off inflammation at the end of its life cycle. So it dampens it down once it's not needed anymore. Let's see. So this study concludes, this study which is from, actually I didn't put the date there. So the study basically concludes that it's not just the stimulation of pro-inflammatory signaling from unhealthy food. So it's not just that when we eat in a pro-inflammatory way, that the pro-inflammatory messaging is the only problem, but actually the lack of signaling from healthy food is also a problem that also hijacks the immune system. So as a concrete foundation, the immune system needs healthy food and lots of it. So this is not about deprivation or dieting. It also needs not too much of one thing. So the immune system, for optimal function, needs a broad and diverse range of nutrients and phytonutrients, which are the chemicals from foods. So lots of small amounts of things, lots of diversity, lots of variety, not just loads and loads and loads of broccoli. Then this paper looks specifically at correction of immune dysfunction in the elderly using natural substances. Now, I'm not going to spend a lot of time here, but of course the elderly are a very specific high-risk population for COVID-19. And this paper looked at using foods and natural substances such as zinc supplementation to help improve immune defense. So the paper really maps out, I mean, you can see it specifically maps out in quite a lot of detail the impact that fruits and vegetables and the fiber, so prebiotics are a type of fiber, the fiber found in fruits and vegetables, probiotics, so beneficial bacteria, short chain fatty acids, which we talked about as being made in the body when we eat the fiber in fruits and vegetables, and polyphenols, which are the chemicals in colorful plants. And what they actually do to the immune system. And this is a technical paper, so if you don't have that background, the takeaway essentially is that foods and natural substances such as zinc have a really significant impact on multiple different areas of the immune system, and that in a high-risk population such as the elderly, changing these variables has a significant impact on changing their immune system and outcomes to things such as infection. And because this is so well mapped out in such a lot of detail, and obviously well known in medical research, it is a little bit astonishing to me that this isn't actually put into practice, that we're not making sure that this at-risk population is getting a broad, diverse range of vegetables, that they're not taking something simple like a probiotic or eating a fermented yogurt or kefir every day. Because this is such a baseline intervention. Everybody eats anyway. So let's make sure that the foods that we're eating are pleasurable and delicious, but also helping our body to have the best immunity possible. This is just something that it's been obvious to me and to my colleagues, and possibly to you if you're interested in health, but it has been ignored up until now. And I'm hoping that one of the outcomes of this big focus that we're having on health is that the focus does at some point really shift to what can we do to change health outcomes. The information is known. It's not a new paper. It didn't come out this year. So the information is known. To do this kind of research and to look at every single immune chemical, every single immune messenger, and the impact that the specific plant chemicals have on those specific immune branches, means that this research has been going on for a number of years and has been funded. So the information is there. And then we just have to put it into practice, because we have to translate that from what's going on in science to what's actually going in our basket in the supermarket and on our plates at home. So flavonoids are one of those plant chemicals that I've talked about. So indole-3-carbinol is the plant chemical, and flavonoids are another type of a plant chemical. So they're a diverse group of plant chemicals found in fruits and vegetables. So along with carotenoids, which is yet another plant chemical, they are responsible for the vivid colors in fruits and vegetables. So often when I'm talking about plant chemicals, we're actually talking about the pigment part of the plant. So there are more than 6,000 varieties of flavonoids that have been identified. And so each piece of fruit or vegetable that you eat will contain multiple, if not hundreds, of chemicals. So for example, turmeric contains more than 200 anti-inflammatory chemicals. And that's why eating colorful fruits and vegetables is so much better for you than taking a supplement that contains high doses of just one of those. I'm not bashing supplements, of course I use them in my clinical practice, but when you eat the food, you get hundreds or thousands of these beneficial plant chemicals. So flavonoids are divided into families, all of which are researched fairly extensively. And the reason that I'm talking about flavonoids is because actually flavonoids contain antioxidant, anti-inflammatory, anti-cancer, antibacterial, antifungal, and antiviral properties. So different flavonoids have been investigated for their potential antiviral activities, and several of them exhibited significant antiviral properties in both lab and in human studies. So again, I've included the I don't think I've included the reference, but I've included some of the information. So here we look at the family of flavonoid, the specific chemical itself, and this is the important part of the information, where it's found in food. So again, this is where the rubber hits the road. So apigenin is found in chamomile, parsley, celery, and spinach. So it's a very easy way to be incorporating antiviral and immune supporting foods or components into your diet. Have a cup of chamomile tea in the afternoon or before bed. It's calming as well. Make sure that when you are making your casserole or making a salad for lunch, that you're including celery, spinach, and parsley. Luteolin is found in basil, also parsley, spinach, and in pepper seeds. So when you're cutting up your capsicum or your red bell pepper for your salad, make sure that you leave a few of the seeds in there and you don't completely de-seed the whole thing. So quercetin is found in red grapes, in radish and radish leaves, in fennel, in pepper seeds. It's also found in cherries and red onion in significant amounts. So my point is, these chemicals are found in the foods that you can consume as part of your meals. So when you are eating for your immune system, you want your plate to be broad, colourful and diverse, and have lots of ingredients in the food that you're cooking and eating. So don't make a salad every single day that has lettuce, tomato, and cucumber. I'm not knocking lettuce, tomato, and cucumber, but that is not as diverse or varied or nutrient dense as you actually need to promote healthy immunity. So make sure that your salads have got lots and lots of different types of vegetables and lots of different colors. There are 6 different color families, and make sure that those are represented in your day or in a single meal. And then this paper actually looks at, or this part of the paper actually more specifically looks at the antiviral effect of the flavonoids. So again, I'm including this really just so that you can see that this is really well understood. It's mapped out. So we actually see, again, they've looked at what is the family, what is the specific chemical, where is that found in food, and then what is the antiviral impact of that? So where have they actually identified antiviral activity? And this is, for me, is very interesting. So they've looked at the antiviral activity in specific different kinds of flu, Coxsackie virus, herpes simplex virus, SARS-CoV, what else? Herpes simplex, which is the cold sore virus, and many other kinds of viruses as well. So Maloney murine leukemia virus or potato virus, things that we wouldn't necessarily have heard of. But when we're consuming these foods, we are innately sort of protected from, not that I think we're going to get a murine virus, but you just don't know anymore. And then they've also looked at the other biological activity. So on top of it being antiviral, it's also antioxidant or anti-inflammatory, or it helps to reduce blood clotting, for example, or it's helpful for heart conditions. So antihypertensive means it helps to keep your blood pressure down. So just remember that the at-risk community includes people who have cardiovascular issues. So eating this way helps with multiple different, because you've got so many chemicals in the food and each chemical has different activities, it's helpful for lots of different variables inside the body. And then I wanted to talk just quickly about mushrooms, because mushrooms are considered a bit boring sometimes, or they're sometimes thought of as being quite bad for the immune system, or just bland and kind of neither here nor there. But actually mushrooms are kind of powerhouse from an immune system perspective. So they contain a lot of important nutrients, including selenium, which is really important for viral defense, potassium, riboflavin, vitamin D proteins, fiber, so very good for the gut and for those short chain fatty acids. But mushrooms also contain chemicals that act as antibacterial, immune system enhancing, they're cholesterol lowering, and they contain very specific antiviral polysaccharides. And I'm talking in this instance about edible mushrooms. So you can also buy medicinal mushrooms and you can get medicinal mushroom powders that you can add to hot chocolate or put in soups and things like that. But actually, just from a dietary perspective, the edible mushrooms contain significant immune benefits. So the ones that you can include from the supermarket, dried or fresh, the simple white button mushroom actually contains a lot of immune modulating and nutrients benefits, but you can include diversity and variety because we always want to be getting a broad range of different kinds of plants. So maitake, shiitake, button, portobello, oyster, king, enoki. Whenever you see a different kind of mushroom, try it. They go well in salads. They absorb the dressing really beautifully. They're great in stir fries and soups. And if you don't love mushrooms, then just hide them in things. You know, include them in a bolognese, even at low levels. You know, a single button mushroom added to an entire dish or a bowl of soup that you're eating will contain enough of that plant chemical to be communicating with your immune system. So it doesn't have to be that you're eating loads if you don't love them. And then for the purpose of this webinar, I did a sort of review of various different diets. So I looked at the Mediterranean diet, the Japanese diet, the vegan and vegetarian diets, and the paleo diet. And I will probably put together a webinar at some point with my findings on all of those different diets. But when I was doing that research and a kind of comparison, because it was interesting to do, but for the sake of brevity, we're already hitting an hour here and I'm not quite finished yet. I really just wanted to include the one that head and shoulders stood out over the rest. So the Mediterranean diet is also the most extensively studied, but it definitely has the most research around it being beneficial for the immune system. So the Mediterranean diet is a diet that is rich in, surprise, surprise, fruits, vegetables, legumes, which is beans and chickpeas, whole grains, fish, and olive oil. So olive oil and fish being the main sources of fat. So it originated amongst people living in the Mediterranean or around the Mediterranean basin. You know, analysis in the literature looks at more than 1.5 million people over a period of time between 3 and 18 years. So there is really a significant body of literature around the Mediterranean diet. And what they have found is that eating in this way confers a significant benefit around reduction in the overall risk of death and disease severity due to cardiovascular disease, which is an immune-mediated lifestyle disease, pro-inflammatory. And in addition, it was also observed to reduce the incidence and mortality from cancer, Parkinson's, Alzheimer's disease, and many, many other things besides. One of my favorite things about the Mediterranean diet is that it's specific about what it includes, so fruits and vegetables, olive oils, etc. But it's also specific about what it excludes. So the health of the Mediterranean diet also requires the absence of contaminating substances such as large quantities of pesticides, fertilizers, and hormone disrupting chemicals, which can alter the gut microbiome and therefore the intestinal immune system and therefore the immune system. So this study looked at a comparison between normal weight children who followed the Mediterranean diet for 1 year, and then they had a control group of children who were eating the standard Western diet. And what they found was after 1 year of the two different diets, the baseline immune function between those two groups was remarkably different. The group of children who were eating the Western diet and highly processed foods had a dramatic increase in long-term chronic inflammation, which would have been really problematic for infection and recovery. And then lastly, digestion matters. So in order to release nutrients from food, in order to metabolize those compounds and to turn food into a usable form for the body, the digestive process is incredibly important. Food needs to be chewed properly. If you have undigested food in your stool, the first thing that tells me is not that you don't have the right digestive enzymes. It means you didn't chew it. your food, by the time that you swallow it, needs to be unrecognizable. You don't have teeth in your stomach. You don't have teeth in your small intestine. And if you don't chew your food in your mouth, then you're not breaking it down small enough for the rest of your digestion to work properly. So it needs to be chewed very well, and it needs to be eaten in a relaxed state. Your stomach acid levels need to be adequate, as this will also act as an additional line of immune defense and helps to maintain healthy gut bacteria. So of all of the ways that a virus can be transmitted, the two dominant ways are through the mouth and through the nose. So we eat them and we inhale them. So having proper immune defense in those two areas is extremely important, and plays a role in antiviral sort of strategy, if you will, or interventions. The emotional environment of eating also plays a role in your immune system. So when you have feelings of joy and love, this creates opioids in the body, and those opioids also play a role in immune signaling. So the eating environment needs to include joy and pleasure, as this will play a role in downstream immune consequences of ingesting the food. It actually changes how your immune system responds to the food that you're eating. So if you're eating a diet or a plate of food that is nutritionally perfect, but you feel miserable and you're lonely, it won't be as good for your immune system as a plate of food that is riotous in colour and flavour, that's not necessarily nutritionally perfect, but contains a lot of great component parts. You're eating it with pleasure and joyful anticipation with people that you love, or in a peaceful environment when you're feeling relaxed and happy. So the immune consequences of that meal are significantly different than the one where it's nutritionally perfect, but you're unhappy eating it. That plays a really big role in how food influences the immune system. So in summary, as I wrap up, improving the diet away from standard Western high processed damaged fats, excessive carbohydrates, low nutrients, that is inherently inflammatory and promotes unhealthy metabolism and unhealthy blood sugar regulation, will improve baseline immune status. So if you or somebody that you care about is eating the standard Western diet, then just improving it, you don't have to be perfect, just making changes to include some extra things, some extra color, some extra vegetables, will help to improve baseline immune status. So it doesn't have to be a rapid and dramatic change. That will actually be scary and overwhelming for a lot of people. So think less about how do I go from A to Z, and more about what is the next step that I can take. Can I increase fruits and vegetable consumption? Can I then increase color on the plate? Can I increase diversity? So now we've included mushrooms. Can we include a few different types of mushrooms? Now that we've included carrots, can we see if we can find some purple carrots as well as orange carrots? So diversity and variety. Can we start incorporating some extra herbs and spices? So specifically, some specific foods to consider are curcumin from turmeric, berries, and a broad range of berries, not just blueberries every day, citrus fruits, rosemary, but all the herbs and spices. Consider broccoli and the whole cruciferous vegetable family. Consider oily fish and omega-3 fatty acids and olive oil. Consider mushrooms, the whole mushroom family. Avoid foods that are not tolerated by or appropriate for you, the individual. So if you know that you have an allergic reaction to mushrooms, please do not eat mushrooms because I told you they were good for your immune system. You have to be guided by what you know works for your body. And seek professional advice if you have any questions about this. Also seek professional advice if you have an underlying condition, if you have cancer, if you have cardiovascular disease or diabetes, then please see your healthcare professional, especially if you're taking any medications, before you make any dramatic changes in any area of health. Prioritize diversity and variety over large quantities of a single superfood. This is harder than it sounds. And it's not to say that you should never just have a plate full of broccoli and a chicken leg, but make sure that you're constantly thinking about, you know, what's the next interesting thing that I can include, rather than relying on your love of broccoli to keep you healthy. And remember to be including pleasure and joy around food, and pleasure and joy around the eating environment. Make your dining room an area that you like being in. Eat at the table, not at the television or at your desk. Can you light a candle? Can you have an essential oil burning? Are you looking at something beautiful? You know, what can you do to make that space inviting and pleasurable for you? And how can you make your food more fun? Do you like cooking? Do you not like cooking? Can you eat with people? It's more difficult at the moment because of lockdown, but perhaps you could do a Zoom, or, you know, be FaceTiming with somebody and having dinner with them at the same time. So that pleasure and joy around food and around the eating environment is important. And remember to chew your food as well. So then lastly, so this, I've obviously not a very good salesperson. As a result of my thought processes around what's happened with COVID-19 and this pandemic health issue and us all being in lockdown, I decided that I was going to create a different kind of class than the one that I normally teach. So I'm calling it my Immunity Community, and it's a 6-week immune health program. So it's 6 live virtual classes weekly. So I'll be teaching them live like this. They will also be on video replay. And it just talks about the same information, but in more detail and with more hand holding. So what is food and why do we need it? A bit more about food and how it interacts with the immune system in a similar vein to today's webinar. But also it really talks about what to actually eat, how to get started, how to prepare the food. What does it mean when you're preparing a meal? I dive a bit more into immune system heroes and villains, and then I also have a class each on stress, sleep, and movement. And I've got 3 bonus pre-recorded webinars as well, with just more background information and kind of helpful information. So this is really, really different than what I usually teach. Because my clinical practice is around specialized complex cases, that's a really specific community of people. But during the COVID crisis, I've watched the entire population experience something that my patient population often does, which is a feeling of overwhelm and a feeling of helplessness around their health. So I'd been kind of waiting with my breath held for the realization to occur that baseline health status and nutrition plays a fundamental role in immune function, and to our susceptibility to viral infection, to our responses to viral infection, and for recovery from viral infection. Because this seems so obvious to me, but it eventually dawned on me that it is in fact my skill set, and I should probably start putting this information out there myself. So this program is for everybody that needs it. It's for the mums at school who are worried about their families. It's for people who are trying to eat healthy but feel overwhelmed with information. It's for people who have never made any kind of health change before, for those that have been on and off diets for their whole life. It's for your mum, it's for your dad. I'll be offering the whole thing for just £99, but I will also be offering it for free for anybody that works in the NHS, for essential workers, for people who are over 60, or anybody who is at high risk. So on top of that, once I've run it for the first time and I've got all of the contents and the accessories together, I'll be offering it to other practitioners to run through their communities as well. Because what I really want to see come out of this is a wave of pandemic health, a wave of pandemic good nutrition to follow this virus, and as a direct consequence of our experience with this virus. So the website isn't finished yet, but it will be done this week, and I'll send out my sign up on social media and through my newsletter if you or anybody that you know is interested in that. So thank you very, very much for joining me today. I'm going to just check in now and see if anybody's got any questions for me. Let's see. So Sumit is asking, can we focus on facts, research and new things rather than basics? So this is a webinar that was focusing on the basics because it's for people who need that basic information. So there is a professional version of this available for people who have more information already, which I signposted at the end, at the beginning of the webinar. will I be sending you the slides and the recording? Yes, I will be sending that out at the end. So probably on Monday morning, I'll be sending that out. So then the next question is fiber from grains or fruits and vegetables, which is better to consume and work effectively? So the best intervention is one that contains a broad and diverse variety of all of those things. It's not focusing on just eating grain or just eating vegetables or just eating fruit. It's making sure that you're including lots of different types of whole grains and lots of different types of vegetables and lots of different types of fruits. So ideally we would want to be eating at least 50 different types of plant per week. So plant includes beans, pulses, legumes, whole grains, fruits, vegetables, herbs and spices. So rather than really focusing on just one thing. So my next question is, I have an inflammatory bowel disease and as a result of that, a poor immune system. Okay, so I've done lots of tests and had lots of supplements, and I've been sick. I'm back to square one and I'm not sure where to go from here. Any advice? So because you have a specific medical condition, I can't offer you advice in this format. I would need to see your entire medical history and I would need to see what's been done and offer you personal advice. So I recommend that you shop around and that you find somebody that you have a good and trusting relationship with. I'm really sorry that you had a bad experience with one person. And I would also say that if you go to a hairdresser and you have a bad haircut, you don't ever say to yourself, well, I'm just never cutting my hair again. You find a hairdresser who you trust and you have a good relationship with. The relationship that you have with your healthcare practitioner plays a really big role in whether or not you're going to get well. You have to find somebody whose approach suits you and whose relationship also suits you, because that therapeutic interaction is a big part of the healing. So talk to a lot of people and find somebody who you trust. Don't choose the person who seems the most qualified. Choose the person who you have the best relationship with. So would I recommend the Mediterranean diet for people with autoimmune disease? So I work a lot with autoimmune disease. This is a good question. But the reality is that I don't believe that there is a diet for autoimmune disease. It will depend on you specifically. So a lot of the work done around nutrition and autoimmune disease has to be really, really personalized, because autoimmunity means that you're reacting to things. Your immune system is in a very reactive state with autoimmunity. It might be that in one person, the Mediterranean diet is very helpful, but another person has big reactions to chickpeas and olive oil. So you would have to personalize and work out the interventions for that person. I don't think that it's a good idea to say this is the diet for autoimmune disease. And that's true of all of them: autoimmune, paleo, Mediterranean, vegan, vegetarian. I'm not about the diet dogma. I'm all about personalization when there is an illness. So Louise is asking, I mentioned that it can take a while for new habits to take effect. What kind of time frame do I mean? It depends on what the baseline is. So often changes can happen within the space of 2 to 4 weeks, but it can take, you know, if you've been ill for 15 years, it might take you 2 years of consistent adherence to a variety of different changes to really notice a permanent shift in the way that you feel and the way that your health is. So it's very different for everybody because there are a lot of different variables that will determine the outcome of that. My point is you kind of need to make the changes consistently, and it needs to be the big picture. So when you eat food, it's different than when you take a drug. So when you take a drug, the effect of the drug happens within minutes or hours. And sometimes you need to be taking it for a couple of weeks. So with some antidepressants, you have to be taking it a little while for those changes to be tangible. But with food, whilst there are some changes that can happen very, very quickly, when you're trying to change the way the body works at a metabolic level, it can just take a little bit longer. But how long it takes is different from person to person. So Christy is asking, should I be taking probiotics daily? Should I introduce these to my children? So probiotics are generally well researched and safe, but whether or not they're good for you or for your kids, I don't know, because I don't know enough about your general health to be able to say that. So my preference is around eating prebiotic fiber and making sure that for your kids' gut health that they've got a broad and diverse range of fruits and vegetables and fiber, plant fiber. But I also know, because I have kids myself, that that's not always that easy. So I give my children probiotics. I don't give them every day religiously. I just give them from time to time as part of kind of creating a supportive general overall intervention for them. But if you have some specific concerns about your kids and about their immunity, then I would take them to see your local nutritional therapist, functional medicine practitioner, or naturopath and see if you can get some personalized interventions. Probiotics are generally safe. And so multivitamin, fish oil, and probiotics are generally quite a good, kit to have to hand. But whether or not that works for you, I can't unfortunately say. So Sumi is asking, do health supplements work better than natural food? No. So natural food is always the foundation of health. Nutritional supplements or health supplements can be used to speed up a process or support something that is weak in the body. So if you have an iron deficiency, it can take quite a long time of eating iron to get your iron levels up. So you can use an iron supplement to get your iron levels up quickly, which can then be maintained by the food that you eat. So it's an adjunct therapy, but it's definitely not a replacement. So natural food is the foundation of health. You cannot out-supplement weaknesses in the way that you eat. So Patrick is asking, would I say that healing the gut is a very important part of recovering from an autoimmune disease? So it can be, and it might not be. So there is a lot of information that tells us that the gut and the gut immune system are fundamental for modulating the immune system in general, and that changes in the gut, which are sometimes called leaky gut or intestinal permeability, are directly involved with the immune dysfunction that is at the heart of autoimmune disease. But we have lots of immune barriers in the body. So we have the skin, we have the genitourinary tract, we have the nasorespiratory tract and the lungs, and also the mouth. So you can have leaky mouth, you can have leaky lungs. So if you've been a smoker your whole life, or if you've been living in an area that is heavily polluted, such as London or Los Angeles, or you've been exposed to an inhalation toxin of some kind, or you have a chemical exposure that has, let's say, organophosphates, that has caused a burden in the body, then the immune dysfunction might have been coming from your lungs, or it might have been coming from your liver and not necessarily the gut. So in that instance, healing the gut and improving the gut immune system is only going to be beneficial for the body. It's only going to be beneficial for the immune system because it helps to reduce the amount of work that the immune system is doing by reducing inflammation and having better immune health, but it's not necessarily going to be the magic bullet. So the majority of time, but it might be 60 or 70% of the time, leaky gut is at the heart of autoimmune disease, but it is not 100% of the time. So I, again, really avoid and take some issue with people who are selling their programs by saying, if you heal your gut, you will reverse your autoimmune disease, because it's just not that simple, unfortunately. Okay, I have a deficiency of vitamin D and B12. And I'm a vegetarian. How can I overcome that? So vitamin D you make by going out in the sun. If you have more melanated skin, if you have a darker skin color, then you will need quite a lot more time in the sun than somebody who has my complexion, which is not a lot of melanin. So I will probably make the vitamin D that I need in 10 or 15 minutes of full sun exposure in the middle of the day. But if you have darker skin, then you will need quite a lot longer than that, possibly an hour. The yeah, possibly an hour, potentially even more. So vitamin D and B12 are probably two areas that I would consider important supplementing, and iron potentially the other one if you have an identified need. Don't ever just take iron without knowing that your levels are insufficient. If somebody is vegetarian or vegan, because it is very difficult to get adequate levels from a dietary perspective of those nutrients. So in that instance, you use food as a baseline and make sure that you've got a nice, broad, diverse range of foods in place, lots of color, lots of texture, lots of flavors, and then you can take a little bit of supplementation to just make sure that your body is supported in those areas. So that was a great question. Thank you. Let's see, have I missed anything? Okay, there's the inflammatory pathways. Now I think that's everything. Let me just see if there is anything anywhere else. So in the chat. Okay, Amy is a huge fan of mushrooms. And Veronique is saying that she has to leave. Okay, so if there's no more questions, anybody want to ask me anything final? Then thank you so much again for joining me, and I will be sending out the recording and also a copy of the slides on Monday morning. I hope you all have a wonderful weekend and stay healthy, everybody.